Hi, I'm Stephen Colbert and we're talking about instructional videos. Here we're going to focus on the forms. So there's a whole range of different options for you to try out, each with its own pros and cons, and I'll take you through each of them now. Okay, so there's four. We're going to talk about screen capture. So this is working within your device. We're going to talk about boards. So this is where you're writing on something. There's classroom observation or video on demand, which is you actually filming your class as you do it, live and in situ. And then finally, we've got green screening, which is probably as complicated as we can get. Okay, so the simplest and the most accessible form is screen capture. So there's a range of different programs that you can use to do this, but in essence, you're recording everything that's on your screen. I personally use a program called Online Broadcast Software, and it does just that. It records your screen. You can also use PowerPoint. You can use a program called Screencastify. There's a lot of different options, but Online Broadcast Software is free, and that's why I use it. So you might think, what will I be recording on my screen? And again, this is completely up to you. You might have a little emulator for a calculator if you're showing students a maths thing that they need to do. You might be drawing on the page, you might be typing, you might be watching a film, annotating a film, drawing on a page. There's a million different things that you can be using a simple technique of screen capture for. Okay, the next option is screen capture within PowerPoint. So PowerPoint will let you record your screen quite easily as long as you have a modern version of PowerPoint. And essentially you're just clicking the record button and you can record each slide individually or you can do the entire thing as you go. If you have a stylus device, you can be writing on your slides as you go. And from what we know from research, drawing on the screen is very useful, and also including yourself in a small section of the video in the corner also improves things. So as much as possible, try and do those two things if you have the technology to do so. The next form is just webcam in device. So for this, you're using whatever camera is built into your device, and this is ideal for demonstrating something. So if you're a science teacher, you're performing an experiment, maybe you're talking people through the equipment or the risks involved in an experiment. If you're a science teacher, you might be acting out a skill, showing where the equipment lives, how to put it away and how to use it. Now, the benefits for this are pretty obvious. Students can actually see and copy what you're doing. The only downside, of course, is that you have to be wary of the equipment that you're using. So is the actual video providing enough detail for students to be able to follow and see what you're doing? Keep that in mind, but this can be very useful. All right, the next form is a document camera. So you can either purchase a document camera or just use a device that you have. The important thing that you need to get done here is get something above what you're working with. If you think about how you might use this, you could sort of be sewing, you could be demonstrating watercolor, you could be drawing diagrams, working out sums, annotating a book, you could be doing a million different things, but you're focusing on fine motor skills with your hand. So in my experience, you can do this really cheaply. You can get some plastic clips that attach your phone to a table. You could use a couple of meter rulers and some plastic chairs at school to get the camera above what you're working with. But I found this a really cheap and effective way to communicate information with students. Okay, so now we're talking about boards. So you as a teacher should find this pretty intuitive. We're talking about whiteboards first up. So all we need to sort out is that we've got our camera at about eye level, and we don't want to be live writing on the board because that takes away our gesture, our hands, and our facial expression a little bit too much. So what you want to do is sort of pre-write notes beforehand and then speak to that directly to the camera. The next type of board that we're talking about is a light board. Essentially, a light board is a large piece of glass with LEDs illuminating around the outside. And the reason that we do this is so that then when we write on the screen with fluoro markers, it pops. And so this is a good way to do a lot of diagrammatic teaching and to take people through, especially maths type things. Very useful for that. Problem is, of course, it costs a lot and it's very complicated to produce. So you're either going to build your own, in which case you need a little bit of technical skills. You need to be able to handle glass and you need to be able to make a frame for it and so forth. Or alternatively, you're going to have to buy one off the shelf, and this is going to cost you probably thousands or maybe tens of thousands of dollars. So classroom observation or video on demand essentially means that you're teaching live to your students and then you're making that available after the fact. So this is good for students that are sick or absent, or if you're teaching remotely. So what you're essentially going to do is you're going to film from either very close up or at the back of the room. And if you're in both cases, you probably want a really good microphone that's attached to you somehow. So you can do this wirelessly or with a very long cord. But essentially you want to make sure that the audio is clear and that everything is framed, and ideally the students are excluded. Obviously, you're going to have to keep in mind the kind of legislation around student safety and child safety, and you're trying to avoid having students in shot as much as possible, but just make sure that you've read those sort of things before you start. All right, our fourth option and our fourth category is green screen. So essentially green screen, you're going to be doing the same thing that you've done for screen capture, but just imagine in the bottom right-hand corner, instead of having you and your background, you're merely going to have your own outline, and we're going to get rid of the background by making it green, lighting it well, and then removing that very uncommon color of green. So once that background is gone, you just have your outline and whatever you have behind you. And of course, I would suggest that you make you speaking bigger than just a small corner in the video, but essentially you've removed the background and now it's you and the diagram or whatever you've got behind you interacting as one unit. Okay, so green screen, you're thinking, well, that sounds like off another planet, that's too complicated. I'll talk you through how I started it and you'll be able to see, I hope, how easy it is to get done. So essentially, I went to a shop, I bought very large pieces of bright green fluoro paper, I taped that to the wall, I got a decent set of photographic lights, cost about $60, I pointed them at the green screen and myself, and then that was my green screen. I actually had a fridge as my tripod because I'm quite tall and I couldn't afford an expensive tripod at that time. So I had a fridge with my phone on top, I had green paper behind me, and I had some decent lighting. So with green screen, the most important thing is the lighting, because if it's uneven, then the green screen effect gets very difficult to remove. But just keep in mind, if you buy some paper, decent set of lights, you can try out green screen for yourself as well. Okay, so that's a really good summary of all of the different forms of videos that you might be able to produce. For this, you want to keep in mind the content. So if your content is very visual, very diagrammatic, you might want to look into boards. If it's very visual and has a lot of images to go with it, green screening would be very useful. And also, if you're not very technically confident or comfortable, you might want to just stick to a screen capture because that is the easiest to deliver on. As always, you should let the learner drive the learning that needs to occur.